Thank you very much for attending. Obviously, we're in the final major week of trading heading into Christmas. Arguably, that week was last week with a lot of central bank action. But actually, we'll have a look at the charts in a minute. A lot of sideways action going on in markets at the moment, probably with the exception of US stock markets, which are on an absolute tear, thanks most lately to the soon-to-be passed US tax regulation, reform rather. But we're into a kind of meandering period, it looks like, in markets heading into year end, with a lot of people reassessing where we're at heading into 2018. And on that topic, we are going to be releasing a few reports on our outlooks for different parts of the market for 2018, so be sure to check those out. Let's have a look at the LCG Trader platform then. So let's start, as we normally start, with the euro against the dollar. Now you can see I have some trend-based indicators on the screen here, namely the 20-period moving average. But as you can see, price not really respecting the 20-period moving average basically tells us we're in a range trading environment. So trend-based strategy is not really working so well at the moment. Now you can see, if I scroll us out a little bit, if you remember, this was the potential neckline for this head and shoulders pattern. We dropped through it, tried to bounce up to it, failed, held that support again, and finally did run through it. And now it's held it a couple of times as support. So that 117 level, quite a good interim pivot level, which has caused the most recent bounce in the price. And then you can see actually just above that, the 1850 level has also been where we've seen a few of these peaks put in most recently. So not on the most recent occasion, but a breakthrough 1850 otherwise points to a potential test to the highs up at 120. So if we're assuming that 115.50 is the bottom of the range for the time being, then we're looking for a push up to 120. But we are basically mid-range right now. If you're calling the low 115.50, the high sort of 120.50, obviously our current price of 117.50 pretty much smack bang in the middle there, 118 and change at the moment. And as you can see here on the RSI, another kind of gauge as to how the price is moving, basically moving between not quite an oversold level and not quite an overbought level, between that 35 and 70 area. Again, at the moment sitting right on the 50 RSI, showing that we're in the middle of the range. So directionally a little bit hard to call. I'm still generally bullish on a longer term horizon, just based off this weekly chart where we had the range top, and now we're in the midst of the test of the range, and expecting eventually that we kind of push out into an extension of this up move. That scenario rests on sort of the 115 bottom of this range, 115 to 115.50 area kind of holding. So somewhere in amongst these highs, we want that to be a support that holds. So potentially that's what we're looking at now. We've put in a lower high, so potentially we're looking at a lower low down here into where all these peaks came in, to define that as a proper retest before we push higher. In terms of potential short-term catalysts in the market, you know, it's difficult trading in the middle of the range, but if we are assuming we've had a break through the 20 period and a successful retest from the underside, maybe we'll be expecting this to roll over again to the downside, but no clear triggers at the moment or clear candle patterns that are particularly reliable within this spot of the price action. Cable, we've been trying to hold the 133 to 133.50 area. That was where we got the breakout. We've had a lot of Brexit related news. Pounds held up relatively well given the kind of bad news, but then it didn't really perform particularly well when we had the good news of the of phase one of the Brexit negotiations getting through and starting the phase two part. Maybe a lot of that was because even though phase one got through, phase two, there's a lot of question marks about the timing and exactly how much the EU is willing to budge in terms of trade. So still uptrending on the weekly chart, so still pause for confidence, perhaps another retest of this rising trend line on the card. So based on the fact that we've had two negative weeks and potentially closing our week in around this kind of support area. So I think it's fairly clear cut. If we do get a close for even the day below 133, I think that opens up at least a little short-term test of the rising trend line around 130, 150, or indeed these lows down at 130.50. Dollar yen in a longer-term trading range as well. 108 up to 114.50 really. The fact that we'd held the 20-week moving average and were pushing up did look positive, but we had a bit of a down week last week. Again, it's to be expected. We're in a range trading environment, so you can't assume you're naturally going to gradually trend higher within a range. But we've had a tweezer bottom here off the old support at 1200, so bit of a dip into that pattern now. So if you still believe that pattern's going to hold, offering some slight value here for another push up to the top of the range around 114.50. Euro sterling also in a range, FTSE 100 pushing again up to the top of its range now, so 7,600 being that key critical level, obviously opening up new record highs. I think should we get a close for the week up above 7,600, that should hopefully open up a decent rally, since other markets, the DAX we'll look at in a minute, Wall Street we'll look at in a minute, the Dow Jones obviously, they've all been pushing higher, so FTSE's got a bit of catching up to do. Looks like after that momentum was sagging off, now we've put a higher low in on the RSI, you see here. So momentum actually, after a while it was sagging, making lower lows while the price was making higher highs, higher lows. Actually now they're in kind of support, suggesting maybe the FTSE's weathered this period of kind of lower momentum and about to break higher. This is Wall Street on a weekly chart. Obviously you can see it trending massively high. We're trying to challenge that 25,000 level basically at the moment. So 25,000 up here is the next logical target that Wall Street's pushing for. We had a bit of a pause from the old highs, obviously pushed up, pulled back literally to the old high, and then we're rallying up again. So I would expect 25,000 to be the next target here, or maybe just a shade under as people try and preempt any stops there in that area, any take profit limits rather. The Germany 30, this is actually a bit more interesting if we go down to the daily chart here. 13,200, we're getting a breakout at the moment. So we had a false breakout the week before last. Now this breakout looks a bit more solid. Looks like a sustained move up towards the previous record high, up around that 13,500 mark. So so obviously potentially a pullback back to the 13,200 mark, but it looks like probably it's off and away at this point. So some sort of short-term pullback strategy in order to capture this move up to 13,500 might be worthwhile. And obviously you can see here we seem to have tipped back into a more positive territory within the RSI, because we've been hovering around this 50 level for a while. But should today close the way it is now, then we're looking good. Obviously we really want that daily close to confirm. Otherwise that's going to be quite a sharp reversal. If we do end up closing below 13,200, that would be very much a bearish signal, I think. Switching gears to gold, got a lot of monthly charts here, but I'm going to dip down to a more short-term basis. So what we were saying last week seems to be transpiring at the moment, is that we've had a push back up after an extended leg down, and we're coming back to retest the lows between 1260, where we've already had a little shooting star pattern there, and potentially having a little run up now to 1265, which is a bit more solid support where some of the bodies of those candlesticks come in. So between 1260 1265 looks decent for this little correction to end and for the down move to roll over again. We don't know if it's going to make new lows, but even if it comes down to test these lows down here at 1240, still a decent view, 25 odd dollars in downside potentially here, and this move into almost oversold territory here, pretty bearish for gold. Should we get a close through 1265 to the top side and up through the 20-day moving average, then that maybe change the opinion a little bit. Then maybe we'd be eyeing a retest of the rising trend line, which would be up here somewhere, for then the next leg lower. Last but not least, we've got a weekly chart. You can see very much a kind of flag pattern here happening with a lot of long legs on the candles on the lows around 61 and the highs around 64 to 65. Should this range give way, got 60 the round number, and then probably 58 as the previous peak to be possible levels where the market finds some new support. Otherwise, you obviously got 68, which was some of the highs over here, and then the 70 level as potential targets to the top side should this little range break. But we've had very compressed volatility here. You know, if you flip on a Bollinger Band, you'll see the bands have got very tight together. So we're expecting an expansion to the top side. We don't know which. We're expecting a breakout in volatility, meaning a directional move one way or the other. The trend is higher, suggests a move to the top side, but be careful because we were in overbought and we've pulled out of overbought territory on the daily chart, potentially suggesting the market's a bit overdone and maybe a steeper pullback towards the 50 level, towards somewhere in the 50, above the 50 zone for a more value buy coming up. So I think I'm going to call it a day about there. Thank you very much for attending, everyone. This was Jasper doing our weekly market analysis webinar, and obviously should you have any questions, please contact our customer support. Otherwise, I will see you it won't be the same time next week because that will be Christmas Day, so this will probably be the last one until the new year. So I will catch you in the new year. Happy Christmas. Jasper Lawler signing out.